Welcome, everyone. So glad we could get together. I think this is very timely. We're here to talk with Dr. Hayden, and may I go by Steve?
Please.
Okay. Because we have a really remarkable group here for a case conference. Two therapists who are working with the same young man, who have been working with the same young man who you are now seeing, Joshua. Dr. Chang, Rocio, Dr. Gomez, Michael, and I know you three know each other.
Yes.
And we're very fortunate to have Ms. Carney, Claire Carney, who is a
Very happy
social
to be
worker
here.
with the Department of Children and Families. And I want to, of course, just remind all of us that we have Joshua's permission to be meeting.
Right.
And the whole point of our meeting is to just help you process how you're doing in your work with Joshua, and any way that we can be of help to you, Steve. So tell us a little bit about how things are going and what questions you have.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm so glad that all of you could meet with me today. In fact, I had a session with Joshua this morning. And unlike other sessions that I feel have gone, fairly smoothly, and, we have some good conversation, and he's starting to open up a little bit with me. This was our 7th session today. And he came in super agitated. He just had been through like this emotional kind of traumatic event, sort of 2 of them. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But it was the first time that he just kind of sat right where Michael's sitting. And he didn't talk. He just sort of put his head down, and he was you could tell he was just grieving about something. So I tried to give him some space to kind of just be however he needed to be, and I finally was able to get him to begin to start talking about what was happening, and so that was a bit different for me. I've experienced that before with other clients, but I had not experienced this with Joshua, and so I was just a little bit thrown off guard with that, but then said, okay, just let's find out what's kind of happening for him, and what he shared eventually was that, as all of you know, he's been really working hard on this relationship with his father and trying there to be something that's positive and helpful and looks like a normal father-son relationship. He also, as you all know, he's got a friend who he thinks is his best friend, and put him in a very difficult situation where he actually took a gun out and put it on his neck because he wanted him to do something with him to, like a future robbery or something.
Josh put the gun on his neck, or
his friend put the gun on Joshua's neck. Yeah, so that happened, and this is, a guy that he's been friends with for a long time and that he trusted. And so anyhow, so he's in that moment, and so we had to kind of talk about what that felt like. And he's got a backpack that he brings into therapy all the time. And so he took the gun with him, and he in his backpack, and he just so happened to be meeting with his dad that evening to go grab, some dinner or whatever, their favorite kind of restaurant they go to. And he went to the bathroom, and his father saw the gun in the bag. And so that just completely turned that evening upside down. And his father was like, I've told you about these guns, and you can't have guns, and this relationship is over, and you blew it. And Joshua, you could just see him sinking in the chair, like he had just ended everything. All the things he's worked hard for in that relationship with his dad all fell apart right there and then, and just felt like there is no hope. So here's a kid who was making really good progress. We were doing really well. I was giving him homework assignments to journal how he was feeling and what he was going through. And then he loses, in his mind, 2 very significant relationships. The one with his friend, the one with his father, and then, I'm more than happy to answer questions, the other thing that happened was this relationship that he kind of has with a gun, right? I mean, we know that he's got that relationship. He's always had he has a gun, and I've never actually asked him how he ended up owning one, but he has one. And I asked him, well, what did you do with it? And he told me that he dropped it off at a place where you can kind of, without sort of ramifications, you can like leave a gun almost anonymously, and no one's ever going to ask any questions. And so we started to talk about that a little bit, and how a gun for him had always been kind of a symbol of power and control, because in foster care, you just have no control over things. And so guns made him feel like he can control something. And gosh, now he got rid of it, and he said he felt bad about it. And so I kind of pushed him a little bit, and I was like, okay, I understand that. But what about the very moment of just literally leaving something off somewhere and letting that go? And that was a pretty powerful, significant choice in your life that perhaps you weren't ready to do. But gosh, it's maybe getting rid of something that hasn't always been the most positive experience for you. Relationship with your father, relationship with your friend, the incident that you all know about a few years ago where he was incarcerated. So it was a pretty emotional session for him. And I'll be honest, for me a little bit as well, because I could relate to some of the things. As a matter of fact, at one point in time when he started to talk about having to let go of this relationship with his friend and how that was disappointing for him because they were so close, but yet he did this sort of unpredictable thing. For a minute, I lost a little bit of focus with him because I actually had a friend about a year or so ago where I had to cut off because I just felt like it just was not working. It was a lot of work, and I had to let him go because he would let me down. And so when Joshua actually said during the session, my friend let me down, I just kind of resonated with that a little bit and kind of got a little bit distracted, a little bit of, counter, it was kind of like countertransference. And so that was, so anyways, and so I just had, I wasn't sure if I moved the session too quickly, if I allowed him to be able to process how he was feeling. Is he going to be okay? I mean, like I said, he was pretty distraught when we got started. We ended with him being feeling seemingly a bit better about where he was headed and what he was going to do, later on that day, later on in the week. But I still question, did I do the right thing by letting him know that I don't think the relationship with his father is over? Did I maybe give him some false hope because I don't know if he was in a place to hear that? Letting him know that I thought it was an okay decision to get rid of this gun that he was so used to and so felt like so attached to. And so I'm glad that we're all here so we can maybe I can process that out loud a little bit with each of you. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
And would I be wrong in saying that perhaps each of us might have had moments where we were talking with the kids who we were working with where something personal kind of strikes us? Okay, well, then I'm glad to share with you that you're not alone.
That's helpful.
And it's really important that you notice that,
right?
Because that way you didn't just kind of follow along with that. Clearly, you shifted back to focusing on Joshua.
Right.
I have one question for you that I want to definitely get input from our colleagues here. Steve, what do you think you did that helped Joshua move from that state of really intense agitation at the beginning of the session that was really kind of impactful for you, which it would be for anybody, to, I guess you said he seemed to be feeling somewhat better, like he could carry on. He wasn't sure whether those relationships were over or not. That's still what did you do that made that difference?
I think when he came, he was so wrapped up into everything was over. And I wanted to share with him that maybe the expectations of the relationships that he's had might be a little bit different. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're over. We all know, relationships can have a lot of different moments in them. And some of those moments are really positive and great. And some of those moments seem ruptured and fractured, and perhaps they're not as great. They're not what we expected to happen. So I was able to, I think, help him understand that I don't think the relationship with your father is over. I would think I was able to help him understand that he had made good progress and that people don't stay angry and upset all the time, that eventually we get back to some sense of, okay, I was pissed off, and he actually used that term, and I was upset and angry. But eventually we get to a place where we can talk, we can breathe, and we can maybe revisit the relationship. Now, I didn't say this to him, but I think we all know that when someone gets angry or upset with you in a relationship, in a weird way, it kind of means we care, right? Or else, because if he didn't care then about the gun, he probably wouldn't have reacted that way. Would have just said, I don't care what you have. I don't really care about your life. So the fact that he got so angry with him. Again, in hindsight, maybe I could have gone back and said, I think that actually means that perhaps he does care, and he cares for your well-being and cares for your safety. But the other part to your question, Julian, is I think I also gave him the time and space to just be angry and be vulnerable and be upset without forcing him or rushing. I'm looking right at Michael because he was sitting right there. I think I was able to give him the time and space to just kind of breathe and let him know that I'm here whenever you're ready to talk. I'm ready to listen, and without sort of judging him or shaming him in what had happened, and providing some glimmer of, hey, that was an unpredictable situation. It's not your fault. Doesn't define you. And I think that was able to help him say, okay, it's okay for me to keep talking about this. And it's maybe okay for me to think that the relationships can still be there, even though that seems so far and distant at this current moment.
Claire, you've known Joshua for longer than anyone else here. I imagine this is probably pretty impactful for you to hear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have. I've known Joshua since he was a young boy. I was started on a case with his when he was probably around 8. And I just had an interest in his life ever since. I've stayed involved. I've probably been, I would arguably say one of the most consistent adults in his life since he was a child. Yeah, I'm not surprised at the reactions he's having, this anger, and these powerful, like this sense of futility coming into a room in a session with you. Because and most of you do know a lot about his history, but having sort of seen him grow up through it, it's been constant 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. So as soon as he makes a little progress, something happens, and then he's like, not only set back to 0, sometimes he's set back to -1, at least in his mind. I think that's what it feels like. So, as he matures and he's growing up now and he's sort of more independent, he's on his own, feeling like he's had this progress happening, and now, there he goes, right back, he's getting yanked back again, yo-yoed back again to this starting point, is going to just manifest in frustration and anger, because that's the model he's had his whole life, is anger and frustration. And that's how he knows how to cope and deal and communicate, the problems he's had in his life.
Yeah, Claire, that's helpful, because I think you're 100% right. Like, he kept on looking at this as a failure, right? Like, he's made so much progress and now it's 2 steps back.
Yeah.
And so as his therapist, I wanted to understand that, but at the same time, helping him see that the forest to the trees sort of thing. Like, I don't think that relationship is over. You might feel that way now, and it is that step. And I just felt for him, like feeling like he made so many mistakes when it wasn't even, and he even talked about it wasn't even my fault, and I was like, I know.
I think that's really positive, because at the end of the day, Joshua, and has since he was a little boy, wants to be better. This isn't a kid who has wanted to just resign himself to a negative fate. He's really aware. He's very thoughtful. I mean, I'm sure all of you have experienced this when you talk to him about a situation. He can articulate his obstacles pretty well, and he's really tuned in, I think, to the reactions and that he's getting from the other people, the other sources of relationships in his life. So, to sit there and now, have someone tell him at this age, listen, it's not like you get better and that's it. There's no more stress and there's no more obstacles, right? It's not like you reach this point in your life where the rest of us have no stress and no obstacles and no days where the relationships in our life feel like they've gone downhill. So I think that's a really positive thing for him to hear. It's a setback, but that's okay. Setbacks are okay. They're part of life. They're part of our life, and they're part of what you're going to have in your toolbox and what you're going to have to encounter. And so he doesn't always feel like every single time there is an obstacle, it's now, oh, I'm abandoned again. This person's leaving me, or I don't have this relationship. I'm not good enough to have a relationship. Whatever it is that he's packing with him from childhood, he's got to know as an adult, he's going to have moments where relationships aren't going to be rosy, you know, and maybe even more so than others because, you know, I care deeply for Josh, but he, you know, given his background, he doesn't always make the best choices in relationships. So he may even, and this is something I don't know if you've dealt with him or not in the room, but, you know, as he gets older and he has more independence and he's got more freedom to make choices for himself, which he will have, you know, what kind of decisions does he make? Between us, he's not always connecting with the most positive people, right? So all the more reason why, knowing that you may be struggling with relationships all the time, and that's okay.
Yeah, that was really helpful, wasn't it? Isn't it great to be able to actually talk with someone who's known Joshua for almost his whole life? And get
Claire,
that perspective?
It was just validating, like, okay, you also kind of experienced that, and it's okay. That you're right, relationships aren't always going to work the way they are, and I think that's a place I can revisit with him the next time or the time after that, you know.
So it sounds like he also, from what Claire is saying, he wants so much to be better, but maybe he's not realizing that being better doesn't mean that he has to live up to some arbitrary standard, but he has to find out what it is that is important to him, and what kinds of relationships really matter and are right for him. Instead of, am I a good enough person? It's more like, am I in the relationships with the people who, and in the way that really matches who I am?
And are they, because he talked a lot about, I was doing all this for my father. Like, we actually talked about him going back to school, getting promoted at his job, and to be a frontline, because he was really excited about that. He was excited to share that with his dad. And he talked about how that was the first thing he wanted to share. You could just see him glowing to think about that. And I was trying to help him understand that you're right, and I know you're doing that for your dad, but you're also doing that for yourself. And how can we begin to look at yourself?
Yeah.
So that was...
Absolutely. I mean, and wouldn't that be, because you were saying earlier that he has this gun, right? Which in a lot of ways is this measure of control for him, right? Wouldn't that be a nice substitute for that? Is like, if you want control the type of relationships you want. Let that be your gun now. Let that be the thing that, you know, lets you say, I'm going to have a standard, and I get to have some say now in other people measuring up to the kind of relationship I want to have, and make that your barometer, your line, your measurement, and that can sort of be that substitute for control for him.
Interesting. Yeah. What a perspective.
Because he's actually experiencing that control in perhaps more in a positive way than in not so positive with having this gun, right? And I was trying to let him know that it's not good or bad you have it, but I think it was a good choice for you to get rid of it, and how now are there other ways to build relationships that can be perhaps healthy, positive, different. But we also have to understand that then that's different than perhaps what he's used to, right? Because he's used to kind of the friend in his life who's not the best character. And he's used to knowing that he can either get a gun or have access to his gun. He's used to his father perhaps not being the nice guy all the time. And so here we are now asking him to think differently about each of those relationships. So that's not going to happen overnight. So helping him understand that that's a process. That's not going to come easy to you. But with our work, ideally, we can kind of get there a little bit.
And what a nice reframe, because that way it's not just because his therapist says he ought to reconsider. It's because he wants to have that sense of control, and that's a way to get it. So it's actually in his interest and his choice, not your choice.
Right.
Which is
right.
Very important.
Yep.
And I want to come back to his father in a moment, if I could, Dr. Chang. But Michael, you've had the opportunity to learn a good deal about Joshua's inner life through his diaries. Does this ring true for you?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts, Julian. And I remember I worked with him mainly during the pandemic when it all, hit the fan. As you're talking, Steve, I'm just thinking, man, I would have killed for a session like this. Because I called him angry exhausted. Like just this, he was emoting, and my recollection from Rocio's notes when I came in after her was pretty flat. But he was angry, and that anger was definitely primary, but just it almost looked like it exhausted more. I think Claire probably saw that too, more than any of us. But the fact that not only was he emoting, but that he was able to repair was essential from what you were saying, because I know he would it was all or nothing, like it's, either one or I didn't.
Right.
And to kind of your point you said just a second ago, I think my recollection of Josh is the gun, that's control, that's power, but it's not the kind of power he wants. I don't think he's ever wanted. He wants to build and create. That's one of the coolest things I liked about him.
Right.
And one of the things that really stood out is like, man, you like, most people don't get to that till they're like in their 30s. And so he's like, but you can tell it's important for him to create things. And that just impressed me that he actually got rid of it, because a lot of the guys I work with they would have held on to that for dear life, man. And I think it's just emblematic of the work you've done, but also of basically of how it's not who he wants to be. It's not, he can't create with that. He can't build with that.
Yeah.
He can only tear things down.
I think you're 100% right. Like, it's this piece about, I can no longer be successful with this, and I've got to do something with it. Now, maybe that was circumstantial because he just came out of two things that were very negative with that gun, but still, to your point, I think the fact that he decided at that point in time, you know what, I'm done, I'm gonna get rid of this thing. And as hard as that's going to be, I'm giving up something that I'm familiar with. I know this is no longer going to bring me happiness. All it's done is bring me disappointment. And I'm glad that he came to that decision, kind of back to your point, Julian, and I said, you should just get rid of that thing. I don't know what you did with it, I don't wanna know, but you shouldn't have it. And so for him, he came to that choice. I wasn't with him. He came to that choice to do that. And he brushed it off when I asked him, and I thought I wanted to take a moment to say, hey, this was a pretty significant thing for you. Not that you just got rid of something that's not that great, but that, like I mentioned at the beginning of our session today, that's kind of a relationship that he's giving up. And so when you give something up, you've got to replace that with something, right? And so now we have to figure out, kind of to some of your points, what are we going to replace that relationship with?
I might call you out on one thing, Steve, you just said, which is I think you were with him. I think the work you've been doing, that was in his head. I think you actually were
How
there.
else could he have come in with that amount of energy and honesty?
Yeah.
I mean, that didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure these two therapists and the social worker had a lot to do with that, but right now it's you.
Yeah, that's a good, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, maybe in the back of his mind, like, my therapist is going to say no, but right, you might be right.
Well, because we talk about relationships, you're a relationship, and that's great. And I know you know that, man, but I think you're important to him, and I think he wouldn't have been as emotive if it wasn't in a way, and I know you probably caught this pretty early in the session, but I disappointed Dr. Hayden, and he might think, which none of that you communicated, but I know how you started this case conference is, that's in the back of your head, and you're like, man, did I do enough? Did I do right by this kid? I think because you did right by him, that's the only way you were able to have that session.
Michael, you said that he's a young man who really always has wanted to create. Do you, from your time working with him, do you think he knows that about himself?
I think deep down he does. He won't admit it because it doesn't fit the identity he's been given historically and with the people, like his friend, quote unquote.
Right.
I think
because he takes 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. That kind of looks like everything you try to create actually fails, even though that's not true. But
and I'm also worried, and I think like probably Claire has the longest view of this picture is I think people in his environment, like the friend you mentioned, it's to their benefit for him to be the kind of person that doesn't create. And I think that
because they can take control over them, control what his behaviors, and that's how he was threatening him.
He's been exploited his entire
Absolutely.
life through the eagerness to have these relationships have constantly been exploited.
Right. So it's scary for him to now think, I have to be in a relationship that I'm not being taken advantage of, that I'm not being exploited. Because
I'm
I don't
making
know.
the choices.
I'm making the choices because I don't know what that feels like. I haven't made those choices. People have made decisions for me.
But I also think, to your point, that's why the therapy is so important, and I think that's why it's so important that he's with a man as well. Because
Definitely.
not that he didn't have wonderful, progress with Dr. Chang as well, but just to have that kind of relationship with a male, with a role model that isn't, that is listening. Like you said earlier, in that session, you gave him room. You let him listen. You let him, have whatever feelings he was having. And typically when he does do something that isn't in, the confines of acceptable behavior, that other person on the other end says, bye,
Right.
they end it, whatever.
Yep.
And you're not doing that. So I think that's just having that happen and having the acceptance of whatever he's feeling or thinking is really valuable.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And where does a young man of color have the opportunity to be listened to in that way by a man of color?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, I know that that's in the room, but I think what's been really kind of special is that we both haven't really sort of talked about it. Like it's felt like, no, this is okay. And this is like natural. And and so I thought, Julian, to your point about, hey, you had other therapists who have been exceptional in your life. You've worked with different people. And now here you are with a male of color. What does that feel like for you? And it hasn't come up to the point where it's something that we have to discuss. And I think that's been pretty special because I've had other clients where I've said, hey, how does this feel for you? I'm male, I'm of color. There could be some competition there. There could be some jockeying for position, if you will. And it's been wonderful to see that hasn't been discussed yet. I think we both have probably in subtle ways have just sort of acknowledged that, and we've seen that, and it feels okay. And I think, to your point, Claire, this piece about the relationships that he's had in his life, especially the men, if you don't do it my way, then you're gone and it's going to be over. And so for him to see that doesn't happen here, like this is going to be okay. This is not going to be gone that way, I think is helpful for him to feel a bit more comfortable with sharing and knowing that he can come in at this elevated state and that it's not going to be, hey, I can't handle this. You're not doing what you're supposed to do, so we got to end the session, but allowing him to kind of, so this is helpful to kind of hear that, hey, wait a second, your piece that actually, it made me feel good actually, Michael, about sort of, no, you were there. You might not have physically been with him, but you were there with him. And that helps. It makes me feel a bit better about kind of how the session emerged and unfolded now that I'm have some time after lunch to kind of think about it and process it a little bit more.
One thought, because I know you have a question about like the dad thing. I think that's what kind of blew it up initially, but is that when people we talk about your kids are going to test you. You hear that a lot when you're a therapist or when you're a caseworker, and sometimes it's very overt. Those are the easy ones. I think this is a more representative example of how your kid will test you in the room is because none of it was like at the front of his brain. It was all that deep trauma in the middle of his brain that was coming out. And have a man of color he respects, who the only man probably in his life who is an all or nothing, and that was a test, and I'd say you passed, man.
Was that true when you were working with him?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Imagine so.
His that looked qualitatively different, which to me is a sign of progression for Josh. His was the exhausted angry. They're just like, oh, whatever, almost like just tell me what to do kind of thing. But with a lot of anger tinged into it. And it was really trying to, like, no, I'm not gonna do that, man. He was wanting you to, like, all right, you're done, you're cooked, man, and you just wouldn't do it.
But Michael, he didn't fire you, did he?
No, he didn't fire you. I moved, and so.
And do you think that it's significant that here you are, still involved in his life? He won't know that except perhaps if his therapist chooses to mention that he had this conversation.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that might not mean something to Joshua. That
Thanks, Julie.
you're still very much concerned about and a
Absolutely.
part of his life, even though you can't be right here physically all the time.
Yeah, and he's one of those kids I think of a lot, and I always wonder what happens. And you always have those kids, and I have a lot of those kids. And it's also, I hope you have another session where he yells at you, because this is the only time I get to see Claire. And that's it. So yeah.
To this piece about the relationship and a male of color and a client of color, and at the end of the session, I just felt like he had made really good progress just in our time together, that I actually was like, thank you for coming in, and I'm proud of you, Joshua. And I've never said that to a client before. Like I've been like, hey, you're doing great work and I can't wait to see you next week. But it just kind of was organic. That just, I'm proud of you. And I thought about that, and I wanted to bring that here because I wasn't sure, like I said it and I was like, okay, that felt good, but did that feel a little too like, he's my son and I'm his dad, you know what I mean? And I felt okay, and he responded like, thank you, and I'm glad I'm here. And actually this felt, this felt good to kind of be here. But I knew we were going to be meeting this afternoon, and I don't know. I'm sure you're going to say, Steve, it's fine, but I'm just curious to know, have you ever said that? Is that a bit kind of too comfortable for
Therapists
someone?
in the crowd?
To me, it sounds like so genuine.
Okay.
And I think that knowing Josh, what I remember about Josh is that he learned so much for healthy connections, for good relationships, that probably he has taken to his heart. Your remarks. So I really am happy that you said it.
Okay.
I also think I've been listening about, and I totally agree with everybody's comments. And I think that with Joshua, one of the things that you have created in your therapy with him is the sense of safety and trust. He feels safe for him to let you know so many things and express all his emotions and his fears of abandonment again, like we have been talking, and so that has to be so meaningful that he has one space, at least one space where he can be himself and talk to you. And I like the analogy that you have that a father who is so angry, I met the father, and I could sense that too. And as Joshua was relating it to you, I went back to my own therapy session with Father and Josh. But, and I really like what you are saying in terms of, but the core emotion there, when the amygdala of that is actually comes down a little bit, is serious, serious care for a son, that, and wishing that he would do well, right? And I see that toward with Josh's anger, the anger that he expressed to you, it gives me that hope that he also knows deep inside himself that he deserves better, and that he is working towards a better life, right? And that, I mean, I'm so glad that I heard that, because when I was working with him, I thought that was a possibility, but he still needed a lot more work. I'm so grateful for all of you here, because I think that in a way, I think that we have given our contribution, but I'm so glad that now you took the baton and things are moving along. I'm glad that what you have done too is you are showing him that there are room for repairs, and that's something that I don't think that Josh had any concept when I actually was working with him. It was all black or white.
Well, Rocio, I don't think he probably got that from nowhere. And I'm sure it's not just his father, but you've met with his father, as you're saying.
That's right.
So did you have the impression that his father might have taken a kind of a black or white perspective in relation to Josh, and maybe to himself too? And did that did that shift at all in your meeting with with Josh's father?
Yeah, I think that, when father is calm and he becomes less afraid of Yasha not making his own mistakes as a young person. I think that he definitely has the best intentions for his son.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what tough situation it was for father to find the gun, and how the whole thing unfolded. And just hearing you, I was just going back, oh my God, that had to be a very difficult scene. And it probably alarmed him so much that he was no longer with the son, right? So whenever father gets so terrorized that Joshua is going to make the same mistakes as he did when he was young, I think that that's when you lose him.
Yeah.
But I could see that you can invite him in one of your sessions, because he's a lot more receptive, and definitely as you were saying, there are some opportunities for repair and maybe different connections, and continue working.
Yeah, I think that different connections, I think, was something that I was trying to stress, that it's not over, but it might not look and feel the way it was before the restaurant incident.
That's right.
And how do I help him be okay with that and let that, be part of his new reality with his father. And we began to talk about that today. I didn't want to say, so this is how it's going to look. I want him to be able to understand that. But I think back to Claire's point about using during the next couple of weeks, saying, hey, are you ready to begin to start thinking about this relationship with your father, where it went, right? Some time has passed, and are we ready to begin to explore that and to use that as an example of, I wouldn't say, and you got through it, but an example of you're resilient, you're strong, you're able to kind of say, okay, maybe it has to look a little bit different, but it's not over, right? And I think that will be hopeful for him, and ideally helpful for him.
As a very creative young man, as you said, Claire, who has been his whole life, then what an interesting perspective it might be. I'm just picking up on what all of you are saying about both Joshua and his father. I wonder if the change in the relationship could be in some ways already beginning because of something that Josh did. And I'm wondering, you probably don't know this, but it'd be interesting to know, I wonder if his father ever gave up a gun. I wonder if it took going to prison for his father before he was able to make the choices that now he's feeling very, very strongly about, not wanting to see his son make the same mistakes he did. But the not making mistakes, I don't know any parent who is going to be able to get past that and say, oh, okay, go ahead, make the same mistakes I did. Probably not.
Right.
But I wonder if maybe it might actually have some real significant meaning, not only for Joshua, but also for his father, that he chose to give up that gun. And maybe it's more than just giving up a gun. Maybe it's giving up a whole way of life, potentially.
Yeah. Right.
Or choosing a different way of life, potential.
Right.
Yes.
And how does father respond to that?
Yeah.
Because, oh, wow, you just made a different choice in your life. And I'm so used to this choice being this way or my way.
Yeah.
And you kind of came to that choice on your own.
Yeah. Does that tell me something about you as my son that I didn't realize, that you have the ability to make that kind of a choice, where I thought you just drifted along and went with whatever crowd and were going to do the same things that I did? Maybe you actually are the kind of person who actually can make choices and make them based on what's right for you. And that might actually be an interesting opportunity for his father to see that his son is standing on his shoulders, but is also leading.
Right.
And in addition to all the wonderful things that he was able to share with you, but not with the father, right? No.
Off of what Julian said, I think his dad thinks it's a runaway train, and always has. And you're going to tell him there's a conductor in there. I'm seeing here that,
And maybe an engineer,
yeah,
maybe somebody driving the train, and maybe it's not the same train that his father's been trying to get off of, and perhaps his father has gotten off that train. Claire, I mean, you've known them both for a long time.
Well, I have, and I think that's all really valid. And at the end of the day, though, I guess the fear, and I'm putting myself in Josh's shoes, is the fear that, I make this offer and I should tell you, Dad, hey, I made the same, maybe there's some similarities or there's something there. If he closes a door in your face, if you decide to present that to your dad and for some reason he doesn't respond the way you want him to deep down inside, that's okay. It's still a strong choice on your part to have done that. So that's, I think, important for him just to sort of take away the risk maybe that might be involved in that.
Okay. Yeah.
But then, another thing I was thinking about was just all that anger, right, that he has, and we know why. I think it's really understandable. But you had said that he had this incident with his father in the restaurant,
Right.
and then he also had this incident with his friend. And I'm just really curious. What I didn't hear is, what was his reaction to this encounter with the friend who, took advantage of his relationship and put that power on him? How did Josh react to that? What did he do?
Yeah, he was angry, disappointed, felt let down, felt abandoned, felt confused. Like, this is my friend for...
He said that to the friend?
Yeah, did he yell at
how
his
was your
friend?
reaction?
Like, what was
No,
what
he said...
actually
What
happened?
did
in
he
He
do?
that
said he was
moment,
so, he just sort of kind of went with the flow, and because then his friend all of a sudden said, that you have to be there for me because I've always been there for you. Now let's go have a protein shake.
So it's a currency for him.
Yeah,
right?
but he...
And what did Josh do?
And Josh was like, okay, and he gave him this big bear hug, and he was like, I know my friend was kind of weird, but I've never seen him interact with me that way. So he was off guard. So all he did was just go with the moment. He didn't agree that he was going to go do something. He just said, okay, and they hugged and they had a protein shake, and then he just got out of there, not knowing like how to respond. And so he was like, well, I didn't do nothing. And I was like, no, you did something.
Yeah.
You helped, you protected yourself, you saved yourself in a very unpredictable, here we go again with the uncontrollable situation. So that's what I was able to get at. Now, I guess I probably could have asked more, but that seems like that's the response. His friend did this. He was like, uh-oh, what do I do here? Let me just go with this, because if I fight back, who knows, I could be shot. And so he just sort of, the fight or flight, freeze type of thing.
sure.
And he just
Yeah.
sort of didn't fight it. He just kind of froze a little bit just so he could kind of take control of that situation. And then he left. Right?
Well, I think I was really curious to know, because I could see it going a lot of different ways, knowing Josh and knowing him for as long as I have. So, but I mean, I also think that is another feather in his cap, so to speak, to say you didn't go to this angry, violent, and react in this angry, violent way. You chose a higher, ground, so to speak,
Right.
reaction to this.
Right.
And that was another sign of the progress. So like, even though he feels like he has lost, like what I heard you say was that he's just, I'm back to square one, or I screwed up again, or it's all over, whatever futility he's feeling at that moment. It's like finding these ways to show him, no,
Right.
actually through the conflict, you are proving that your responses to these conflicts are actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
showing your progress, showing your maturity, showing these things. So, as opposed to like, we had this violent, like I didn't know what
Right.
actually transpired between the two of them.
Right.
But
Right.
seeing as how he just survived, got out, and then came here and spoke about it, that was his way of dealing with it.
Right.
Hello, like that's amazing.
Yeah,
right?
that is amazing. And you know what? as I'm thinking back about how I responded to that, I think I alluded to that, but not quite at the depth that you're describing. Like, hey,
Okay.
wait a minute. This was a stance in resilience, and a stance in strength,
Maybe,
and a stance in a safety mechanism
Control.
and control that I
Control
think
again.
when this comes back up, I think I will revisit that, because I think you're right. He thinks, no, I screwed up and I just should have done something different. And I think it would be helpful for me to be able to say, whoa, hold on a second. Let's look at the sequence of events and how that felt, and how you got through that, and the signs that it says about who you are as a person, as a human being. I think it would be helpful for me to kind of drill that home a little bit more, because I think he might be able to, hopefully he'll be able to see that and say, oh, okay, I am capable of this type of behavior. I am capable of taking control over something, especially from someone who is so intimate and close with me.
So Steve, something that you said was about Josh's reaction is really important, that he had this initial reaction where it's almost like he shut down and went on automatic pilot.
Yeah.
And I thought about what Claire said about survival and how Josh has had to survive so much. So I was wondering, Michael, what do you think? Do you think maybe it might be important for Josh, with Steve's help, to explore what it means that he had that immediate automatic pilot reaction?
Yeah, what's going through my head, Julian, was that's kind of where the meat on the bone is, Steve. And what Claire said was, I think she hit the nail on the head, is that I know a lot, especially as therapists, when something like this happens, I think the right move is what you did. And it's like, hey, it's a moment of strength, like this is all you could do. And I know our kids get sick and tired of that, because they're like, stop focusing on the positive, everything, like, right? He's like, everything's screwed
Right,
up.
he's all positive, doc.
Yeah, like, what is it? Stop, focus on it. And I think there's a case to be made for that, because what my thought, what I tell Mike is when that happens, is that I was like, dude, I don't consider you like, ready to discharge from therapy until like you have you're in the Super Bowl down by 20 moment, and then you come back after halftime. Like that, I need to see that. And we don't obviously want to encourage those moments, because those are horrible, difficult moments, but I need to see something like that. And I think that was your moment with Josh, is that between that stimulus and that response, between that alarm reaction and what he did, he was highly strategic, man. That was him thinking, Claire nailed it. He didn't fight, which is his usual go-to. He he couldn't fight, and he knew it. And so he froze, but in a much more strategic way than just like he balled up. And, and it, like, again, he usually for me looked exhausted and just flat, and just like he did look frozen. He did look cocooned, but he was highly strategic. Like, he's, almost like he's like in a movie or something, trying to figure out how to get through the bad guy, and do it safely. Yeah.
How could he have gotten to the point of making a decision to relinquish the gun, which meant so much to him, without having done some really deep processing, which he's probably not even aware of, but you can help him begin to see.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's your next session, man. It's like, hey, let's do a breakdown of that moment, and let's lay it out. That's what I want to show you, Josh. And I think with you, he'll go with you on it. Just because of the relationship you have, man. I think that's it.
Yeah. Even if he's not a football fan, the down by 20 in the Super Bowl in the second half is a great one.
Yeah, I don't know. You're in American Idol and you're not doing it. So, I don't know.
I'll come up with something.
Yeah, Steve's got this.
Yeah.
Or maybe your best friend holds a gun to you, and you're shocked and you can't believe what's happening. And what do you do with that? Well, immediately you don't know what to do with it, and so you just do whatever is safest and best, and you don't make any decisions. And then what's the next decision that you make that really matters? Yeah. And if it's a decision that actually enables you to start a different path in your life, that tells you something about who you are and what's going on inside of you. Maybe we can find some more of that and make it something that you can actually tap into.
Yeah, I like that train of thought and the process, like bringing him there, and not doing that right away, but kind of in time so he can see it, because I can see it. But it's not important for me necessarily to see. It's important for him, right?
Yeah.
To kind of
and
see
nuts
that.
and bolts, man. It's some of my kids. Like Josh is like, I'm on a hit. I should have fought him. Like, all right, let's follow that rabbit hole, man. What would have happened? My suspicion, I don't know, man. Unless he swole up since I saw him, man. He was kind of a smaller guy. He wasn't like, didn't look like The Rock. I'm guessing this guy was maybe physically bigger than him, but like, all right, let's go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, he talked about that actually. He was like, you got to see my friend. He's the big, strong, guy, and he talked about
to
that.
Claire's point, no, you pick the right decision. The right decision often feels crappy. And I think he still has to learn that, and that's what Claire was talking about.
Yeah.
Was you're like, sorry man, being a good man is crappy. It feels bad. It doesn't feel good all the time, but
Doesn't.
it's the thing you want, and it's the person you are.
And the right decision is sometimes the road less traveled.
Yeah.
Sometimes it leads to a whole different road.
True.
Maybe different relationships, or
Yes.
same relationships, but maybe in a different way.
Right, and I think that's what I was trying to kind of help drill home with him. Same relationship, but in a different way. I like how you just sort of phrased that, right? But, you know.
Well, we are all busy people, and it's great to have this time together.
Yeah,
but I
thank
think
you.
we're
Yeah.
kind of coming to a close. Is there anything else you wanted to reflect to us or ask of us?
This has been super helpful to kind of, listen, as therapists, we all want to do good work. We want to make mistakes, and you want to feel good about what you're doing with the person that's sitting in front of you. So this helped normalize and validate kind of some of the choices that I made, and you've given me some good sense of direction of where I can continue to build with him based on this, yet again, another traumatic set of events in his life. So I think I can now kind of think about this conversation and next time I see him. I kind of give him a homework assignment every time to maybe journal something, how he's feeling. I usually give him a specific question. This time I just said, just go for it, whatever you want. And he actually said, so anything? And I was like, yeah, like he actually got excited about it. Like,
You're giving
finally,
me control?
You're giving me control, right?
The
He's not used to that.
creativity
And
again,
creativity.
Right, and the creativity. I hadn't even thought about that. And so I'm curious to see if he's going to do that. And so I invited him to kind of do that, and we'll bring that up. But this is giving me kind of another platform to kind of begin to introduce that moment in time. And then how do we look at relationships that are the same, but perhaps now they're going to be a little bit different. And that I like this last piece, Michael, what you said about sometimes making the good choice doesn't always feel like we made the good choice, the road less traveled, but sometimes we have to make those difficult decisions. And I just love the fact that he came to that on his own. It wasn't his father shaming him, it wasn't his friend telling him, it wasn't me telling him, it was him making that decision. And I think that for a guy like Joshua is certainly is profound in my opinion. So.
And maybe sometimes it's okay to share that countertransference reaction of pride.
Yeah, yeah.
When it speaks to the young man in a way that doesn't ask anything of him, doesn't put any burden on him, but just actually shows him something where maybe he can say, gosh, if my therapist is proud of me, could I ever look in the mirror and say that myself?
Right.
That'll be a while, but that's where you're going.
That's where I'm going, yeah.
Well, colleagues, any last thoughts that you wanted to add?
Well, I'm very glad that things are working out for Joshua, even though he's going through a hard time.
Yeah,
but
me too.
it seems that he's doing the work.
Yeah.
And thank you for.
Yeah. No,
that.
thank you. Yeah, me too.
And I
It's great.
think we transferred him to the right guy.
Yeah, isn't that great? It must make you both feel so glad.
Yeah, you all did a lot of that foundational work, so I was glad.
This young man is in good hands, and he's been in good hands, and he's been in good hands for many years.
Well, I'm also very inspired by, the potential here for Joshua and where this is all going and the relationship you're cultivating with him. I think I can only see good things ahead for him if we continue down that path. So thank you for
Thank you, Claire.
that.
Yeah.
Gosh, isn't that amazing? A session where you learn some things that are pretty awful, and a young man who's feeling pretty awful too. And we're not making it any nicer than it was. Of course, this is really hard for him, and it must have been a really tough session for you.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
my gosh, it actually seems as though it's opening up some wonderful possibilities.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.